Yo, what is up? So in this tutorial, we're gonna go ahead and start our structure setup, and as you can see here, we have a ton of stuff to do. But yeah, this is our structure setup. We'll have all the different stuff that we need to put into our data table. We can add different things, you know, armor info, weapon info, current stacks, quick slot stack, inventory stack, item types. We can set the item image, set the mesh. In the armor, we can set the skeletal mesh. Right here, yeah, skeletal mesh. We can set all the different armor info. Level is required. We got our weapon info that we can do. Quite a bit of stuff to add to this. We need to make all of these. We've got a bunch of different structures we need to make, and we got a bunch of different enums we need to make too. So yeah, it's gonna be quite a bit of work. So let's just hop into it. Alright, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hop into the blueprints, components, and player stats. I'm just gonna change some things here because it's just gonna be easier to deal with later on. So in all of this stuff, I'm just going to change it to floats. It's going to be easier to deal with. So our immunity, robustness, focus, I'm going to change that to floats. All of that's already a floats. Yeah, all of this, we can change the floats. Just going to be easier to deal with later. All of that. Base stats. Poise, we can change that to a float. All of this right here, I'm going to change to a float. So our, you know, HP and stamina and FP, change all that to a float. And the rest of that, we can leave the same. Okay, so go into our blueprints. We're going to make a new folder called Structs. We're gonna open this guy up. We're gonna create a blueprint class. Actually, no. We're gonna right click. We're gonna go to blueprint. We're gonna create a structure. We're gonna call this ItemInfo_S. And this is gonna be our main structure where we put basically all our other structures into. So pretty much what a structure is, it's just like a collection of variables. So you can just add a bunch of different variables. You can add a bunch of different variable types. And we're going to be using this for our data table. And the reason why you use a structure is, you know, when you have a bunch of different items that are going to use the same variables in a game, it's just going to be easier to put them in a structure and then, you know, assign this to a data table. And then based on that data table, they will you know, you can just assign different variables to different items and stuff, which is what we're going to be doing for our inventory. So, yeah, it can be a little confusing. This is where we kind of get to some of the more complex sides of, you know, blueprints and stuff. So, yeah, I've got a bunch of references to make this go faster. It took me a while to set this up, so I'm going to try to make it go a little faster with some of these pictures I took. So, right here, first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a variable called item class. And we'll just leave that as is for now because we need to make our items to actually make this the variable that we need. But for now, we're going to leave it that. Next thing, we're going to make a variable called item name. And this is going to be a text. And next one, we're going to make a variable called item image. Item image. This is going to be a texture 2D. And this is going to be pretty much the icon that we see when we add it to the inventory. So that's what that's going to be. We're going to need, we're going to set up a variable called mesh. So we're going to be setting up our meshes inside the data table. So you can assign what the mesh will be inside the data table, and we're just going to make this a static mesh object reference. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a variable called current stack. We're gonna make this an integer. We're gonna add another variable called quick slot max stack. We're gonna also make that an integer. We're gonna make another variable called max stack. That will also be an integer. And we're gonna make another variable called item index. Item index. This will kind of control where it sits inside the inventory. That's what that's gonna be. We're gonna make a variable called item type. Item type, and this is gonna be our item type and numerator, like that. And we need another variable called price and sell value. So price, we're gonna make this an integer. We're gonna make another one called sell value. That'll also be an integer. And now we need our other structures. So yeah, we're gonna make another structure called consumable info. So we're just gonna close this one out for now. We're gonna go here, we're gonna right click, we're gonna go to blueprint, structure. We're gonna call this consumable info underscore s, like that. And we can go ahead and add this consumable info to our item info. So we'll just add that. We're gonna call this consumable info, like that. And then we're gonna make this variable a consumable info structure. So yeah, you can add structures. The other structures kind of do it to keep things organized. As you can see here, we get a little drop down that's gonna have all our variables that are inside of our consumable structure. So let me just look. All right, let me pull up my other reference here. This one, consumable info, right here. So what we need in the consumable info is our consumable type. So consumable info, or consumable info structure, we're going to call this consumable type. And we need to make a new enum for this. So let's go to our enums here. We're going to right click, blueprint, enumeration. We're going to call this consumable type underscore e. We're gonna open that up. Let me pull up my other reference. It's gonna be this one. So, consumable type. We're gonna need some things in this one. If I can get the right picture to come up. It's right here. We're gonna add an enum called HP. Whoops. HP. We're gonna add one called FP. We're gonna add one called stamina. Stamina. We're gonna add one called buff strength. Buff strength. We're gonna add one called buff dexterity. Buff dexterity. We're gonna add one called buff endurance. Buff endurance. We're gonna add one called buff intelligence. Buff intelligence. And buff faith and arcane. So buff faith. Then we're gonna add one called buff arcane. And we're gonna add one called buff armor. And we're gonna add one called buff crit. Buff crit. And we're gonna add one called heal over time. And you can add some for mana over time and stuff like that. So heal over time. And yeah, if you wanted to, you could add, mana over time, stamina over time, so that it just, we can add some things to increase that over time later. Just gonna do a save all there. I'm gonna go back to the consumable info. On our consumable type here, I'm gonna set it to be our consumable type _e. And now what else we need is two floats right here. We're gonna add one called potency. It's gonna be a float. We're gonna add another float called duration, like that. And now that one is pretty much done. We can close both of those out. Now if you go here, you can see in the drop down we have all of that info inside of our structure. So now we need our equipment info. So let me pull up my other reference. Should be this one. Yeah, okay, so in here, what we're gonna do, we're gonna go back to our structure folder. We're gonna right click, blueprint, structure. We're gonna call this equipment info _s. We're gonna open this guy up, and this one we're gonna name this first variable called skeletal mesh, and this will be where we set our armor and stuff. Skeletal mesh, skeletal mesh object reference. And what else we need? We need another structure called armor info. So we can just go ahead and add that variable. We'll call it armor info. Then we're going to go back down here. We're going to right click, make a new structure called armor info _s. We're going to open this guy up, and I'm going to pull up my other reference to see what we have in it. And okay, so we need a variable in here called armor type. Armor type. It's going to be an enum. We need to make a new enum. So save all. Let's go to our enums. We're going to right click, blueprint, enum. We're going to call this armor type _e. So we're going to open that guy up, and I'm going to pull up my other reference to see what I have in it. Whoops. I need to close that one. That is the wrong one. Let me just find the right one. Here we go, right here. So we're gonna have none, head, chest, hands, and legs. So I'm gonna add none. I'm gonna add one called head. I'm gonna add one called chest. I'm gonna add one called hands. I'm gonna add one called legs, like that. So now we're going to go back to our armor info, and we're going to make this our armor type _e. And let's see what we need here. Our next one is going to be attribute type. We need a new variable called attribute type. Attribute type. And this is going to be a new enum called scaling type. So in our enums here, we're going to right click, blueprint, enum. We're going to call this scaling type _e. Then we're going to open this guy up, and let me just find I can close this one down. I don't need that anymore. Also, in our main item info, we can go ahead and add this equipment info, and we're gonna find our equipment ItemInfo Struct, and you can see we already have some of the stuff we've added in there. Let's go back to armor info. Our equipment info. Armor info. We need to make this our armor info struct. And then an equipment info. Equipment info. Yeah, there we go. I don't know why we're getting a... Let me just add this back. Equipment info. And I don't know what that was about. Equipment info. Cool. Okay. So now we need our scaling type enum. Let me just find that guy. So right here, scaling type. Need to add all the stuff: none, strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and arcane. Add none. Strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, arcane. There we go. So now back in our armor info, attribute type, right, this is going to be our scaling type enumerator. Let's see what else we need. And close that guy down. We need a attribute a level required. We're gonna add a variable called attribute level required, and we're gonna make this an integer. We need a variable called damage negation, which is gonna be another structure. So add a variable called damage negation. We need to make a new structure for this. Let me also check back. Armor info. Okay, so yeah, on our equipment info structure, on this armor info, we don't want to make that an array. So that way you can add different armor info if you want to. So, alright, so scaling type, we can close that guy down. Armor type, we can close that guy down. And now we need to go back to our structs, and we need to make a new structure called damage negation. So blueprint, we're going to make a structure called damage negation info underscore s. I'm gonna open this guy up and let's find what we need here. We only need 2 variables in this, which is going to be our damage type. So we're going to call this damage type. We need to make a new enum for this. So let's go to our enums. We're going to right click, blueprint, make an enum. We're going to call this damage type underscore e. We're going to open this guy up. And let's see. Our damage, let's find our damage type reference here. Right here. So, we need one called physical DMG, strike DMG, strike DMG. I'm gonna do one called Pierce DMG, magic magic DMG. Fire damage. Fire damage. Lightning damage and holy damage. So lightning damage and holy damage like that. We can close this one out, and we're gonna make this our in our damage negation info. We're gonna make this our damage type E. Then back and here we can close that guy out. We're gonna add a variable called negation amount. We're gonna make this a float. And now that guy is done. So let's go back to this one. Damage negation on our armor info. Equip armor info. Damage negation. Yeah, damage. We need to make this our damage negation info. We're gonna make this an array, so that we can you know, negate more than one type of damage. I'm gonna do a save all there. And now we need another structure called stat increase. We're gonna add a variable called stat increase. Like that. This is also going to be an array, but it's going to be a different structure. We can close this structure down. We're going to go back, save all, go back to our structures. We're going to make a new blueprint structure. And we're going to call this stat increase underscore s, or stat increase info underscore s. We can open that guy up, and let's find what we need in here. Stat increase. So we're going to use our stat type. This is going to be, first variable is going to be stat type. And this is going to be our stat type. Or have we not made that? Stat type. I guess not. Okay, we need to make a new one. New enum called stat type. Let me just find it. Stat type E, yeah. So let's go back to our enums. We're gonna right click, blueprint, enum. We're gonna call this stat type underscore E. We're gonna open this guy up, and we need to add a bunch of variables in here, or a bunch of names. We're gonna call this one current HP. We're gonna add one called max HP. Max HP. We're gonna get current FP and max FP. Current FP. And we're gonna add one called max FP. And then we're gonna get current stamina, max stamina. Current stamina. We're gonna add one called max stamina. Then we need a max equip load. Max equip load. And current poise. Current poise. And current discovery. Current discovery. And current memory. Immunity, robustness, focus, and vitality. So add that. Immunity. And another one called robustness. And focus and vitality. Focus and vitality, like that. And now in our stat increase structure, we're gonna find our stat type enumerator, and let's see what else we need. Increase amount. We're gonna add a variable called increase amount. That's gonna be a float, and then we can close that guy down. We need to go back to our armor info here, and we're gonna make this our stat increase info struct, like that. And let's just do a save all here. And let's see, what else do we need? Stat increase. Where are we at? Let's go to our armor info. Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. So let's go to our equipment info, and now we need our weapon info. So let me pull this back up. Yeah, so we're gonna need another variable called weapon info, and this is gonna be another structure, but it's gonna be a different one. So we can close all of this down. This one is done, and as you can see here, we got all of that info that we just made in here. You can change a bunch of stuff, and I'll kind of go over it towards the end, kind of how to control some of that. But let's go back to the structure. We need, let's see, weapon info structure. So let's go to our structs. We're gonna right click, blueprint, structure. We're gonna call this weapon info underscore S. We're gonna open this guy up. And now in our weapon info, let me just find my reference for it. Let's see, maybe here. Maybe the next one. Weapon info structure. Here we go. So we need our weapon type. So we're gonna add a variable called weapon type. Should already have this enum called weapon type underscore, or weapon type E. And then we need our scaling info. So we're gonna make another variable called scaling info. This is going to be another structure. We're going to right click, blueprint, structure. I'm going to call this scaling info underscore S. We're going to open this guy up, and now I need to find my reference for what we need in here. Scaling info. So we need a variable called scaling type. So scaling type. And this is gonna be our, do we already have scaling type enumerator? Scaling type enumerator, yes we do. Cool. Scaling tier. We're gonna add a variable called scaling tier. And we need a new enum for this. So go back to your blueprints, enums. Oh, we already have that enum actually. Never mind. We're just gonna call this weapon scaling tier E. That's the one we need. We already got it. And now we need attribute level required. We're gonna add a variable called attribute level required, and we're gonna go back to, let's see, that's going to be an integer. We need to change that to an integer. The weapon info. This is going to be our scaling info structure, or our scaling info. We're going to make this an array, right? Let me just check that. Yeah, it's going to be an array. Now we need another variable called damage. This is going to be another structure. We're going to go back to our structs. We're going to right click, make a blueprint structure. And this is going to be weapon damage info underscore s. We're going to open this guy up. And let's see. We can make that go away. Damage, weapon damage. Let me find our weapon damage reference. Weapon damage. So damage type and damage amount. So we're gonna add damage type. And do we have a damage type enum? Damage type E. We're gonna add a variable called damage amount, and we're gonna make this a float. So back on our weapon info, so let's make this our weapon weapon damage scaling, our weapon damage info structure, and I think that might be it. Think that might be it. Let me just make sure we're not missing anything on our weapon info structure. We got our weapon and weapon damage structure, and yeah, I think we're good. So yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. So just to kind of show you how some of that stuff works. So the reason we're making all these different structures, some of them are arrays, some of them are not, is if you come down here, specifically in our equipment info, let me delete one of those. So we have our armor info and our weapon info. If you go to your default values, you can kind of look at some of this stuff. And you see we only have like the little thing right here, but we made them an array. And when you make one of these structures an array in your item info, you can just press this plus button. So that way, like how we're setting our armor type here, and like attribute type, say you want this to, you know, if you want, you know, your armor type, say your chest piece, you want the attribute type that you want to be able to use with that. Maybe you want that to be more than one different type. So that's why we made these an array, because now you can just add a whole other type to that, and you can change, you know, different attributes and what is required for them. And you can come in, change all these different values, just press these plus buttons. Any of these pluses are all the arrays that we made. Whenever you see these pluses here, let me just close these down, try to make it easier to understand. Where did that go? Just close that. So yeah, like on our weapon info, we hit the plus button. So if you go to your weapon info and you hit the plus button on our item info, you see we have our armor type, which was here. Or hold on, wrong thing. Let me go back. Weapon info, armor type. Hold on, we have something set wrong here. Scaling info. Let's see. Scaling type. Where did our armor info go? weapon info, scaling info, item info. Let me see what's going on here. Weapon info plus. Why are we getting armor on our weapon? Because our weapon info is not that. Oh, we never set our. So go to your equipment info structure weapon. We need our weapon info structure here. So change that. Change that. Yeah, that's why. You go back to item info. Trash that. So on weapon info, hit plus here now. So weapon type, you see now. Now we have our weapon info structure here that we made. You come over here and you see when you hit the plus on the weapon info, you can change the weapon type, the scaling info that we added in here, which is an array, which is why we have the plus here. You can hit the plus on that, which gives us all of our scaling info right here. As you can see, damage right here. If you add a plus there, you see we get our damage info structure that we made right here with all the information we made in there. And yeah, you can just trash this stuff for now. I'm just trying to explain kind of how the multiple structure setup kind of works. So we made a bunch of structures and some new enums, and it's definitely it can definitely be confusing, but yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this item info structure to make our data table that will control all the info for the items in the game. So yeah, but yeah, we're gonna call it here. Definitely let me know if you have any questions, because this can be confusing for sure. Yeah, we're gonna call it here. I appreciate everyone for watching. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you're new around here, definitely subscribe. If you have any questions, let me know those down in the comments. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.